Hello folks, thank you for stopping by to check out my channel. This is Civil War Reports, and if you are interested in the American Civil War, this channel may be for you. So please show this channel your love. Give me a big, huge thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Today I am back on the Gettysburg battlefield, and I'm going to bring you another episode about the Battle of Gettysburg. Hello and welcome back to my channel, Civil War Reports. I am your War of the Rebellion reporter, Brian Thomas Kopak, and today we're going to pick up on my series on the Battle of Gettysburg. We last left off discussing the Noon-time Lull, and today we're going to discuss the action resuming in the early afternoon of July 1st, 1863, with General Iverson's attack on the Union line. You might have heard this old saying that the Battle of Gettysburg started with the Northern Army coming up from the south and the Southern Army coming in from the north, and there is some truth to that. Most of the Union Army was in Maryland when the battle opened up. Maryland is south of Pennsylvania, and General Ewell, his Army Corps was up north, up in the Carlisle area. Remember, on June 28th, Lee issues orders to concentrate in Gettysburg. So Ewell's corps does come from the north into Gettysburg. So there is some truth to that old saying that the Battle of Gettysburg opened with the Northern Army coming up from the south and the Southern Army coming down from the north. So when General Ewell arrived on the field here on Oak Hill, he was able to survey the field in front of him, and he could see the remnants of the morning's battle. He could see wounded and dead on the field. He probably even saw some Confederates being led to the Union rear as prisoners of war. Let's keep one thing in mind, that at that moment, Ewell is the highest ranking Confederate officer on the field. He is in charge of the Confederate Second Corps, and he has orders from General Lee to concentrate his corps either in Cashtown or Gettysburg, and also to avoid a general engagement. He's only about a mile or so from the town of Gettysburg, not even. And his orders were to concentrate in either Cashtown or Gettysburg, and to avoid a general engagement. But an engagement has already begun. He could have not engaged and continued on towards Cashtown and ordered Heath's division, I'm sure, to turn around and go back to Cashtown to concentrate there. But Ewell sees that the battle has been engaged. He can see Heath's division up on Hers Ridge, and he certainly can hear and see the results of the sporadic cannon fire that's taking place on Hers Ridge towards the Union lines over on McPherson's Ridge. Ewell decides to engage. The Noon-time Lull comes to an end. Rhodes's division is going to go into action. One of the first batteries to go into action was Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Carter's battery, and they began to fire onto the Union lines. Now, this was causing problems for the Union, because now they were being hit not only from the front by Heath's batteries, but also now they were getting enfilade fire from Rhodes's division up here on Oak Hill. Let's see how the Yankees reacted to that. The Union Army faced a new threat. They were already dealing with Confederates in the west, that being Heath's division, and now they had a new threat in the north, Rhodes's division. And Rhodes, his batteries come online and they start lobbing shells into this area here. So what does the Union Army do? Well, in an effort to protect and defend themselves, they move 3 batteries off of the western arm of McPherson's Ridge and into this low area here between the eastern arm of McPherson's Ridge. You can see McPherson's barn off in a distance. In this area, 3 Union batteries would turn, from facing west, redeploy, and face north, and to engage in counter battery fire with Rodes's batteries on Oak Hill. So who were these 3 batteries from the Union Army that turned and faced north? Well, it was Reynolds and Cooper's battery from the 1st Corps, along with Caleb's battery from General Buford's cavalry division. Now, let's take a look at Rodes's attack on the Union line. Today, we're specifically only going to look at Iverson's brigade. I'm now standing along Oak Ridge here, and I want to point out 2 things about this area before I get into the Union response to Iverson's men coming across the field. One, I've been told by numerous battlefield tour guides that this is probably the most altered part of the Gettysburg battlefield. Part of Gettysburg National Military Park, this is probably the most altered area on the field. Made mostly so because of this road they put in so that we visitors can get a better understanding of what happened in this area. And also, during that noontime lull, this area was reinforced, or manned, should I say, by Baxter's brigade. And it would be that brigade, Baxter's brigade, that would greet Iverson's men here in the afternoon on July 1st, 1863. Now, I was informed a few years back by a licensed battlefield tour guide here that Iverson's men basically came out of the woods you see in front of you, known as Farney's Woods, named after the family that owned the area, the land in this area here, and came across the Mumsburg Road and emerged onto the field in the area seen right in front of you now. In front of you is the monument for the 17th Pennsylvania. I've been informed that the Farney house would be a little to the left of that monument along the Mumsburg Road, and that their barn would be somewhere in this area over here. So what can we say about General Iverson before we get into his attack? What can we say about him as an Army officer? Well, he is a veteran of the Mexican War. And between the wars, he was a lawyer, he was involved with railroading. His father was a congressman and probably used some influence to help his son get advancement. And at the start of the war, he is a lieutenant in the 1st U.S. Cavalry, which is kind of odd when you think about it. If he was in the cavalry, you would think he had some experience with reconnaissance and reconnoitering ground, which was failed here. He didn't do that here. And at the start of the war, he volunteers himself for the Confederate services, and believe it or not, he raises, even though he's a Georgian, he raises the 20th North Carolina Regiment. You would almost think he would have raised the Georgia Regiment, because back then, even the Northerners, but particularly the Southerners, were very proud of the states they came from. But he does raise the 20th North Carolina Regiment, and there's no doubt about his bravery. He's wounded during the 7 Days battles, and at the Battle of South Mountain, when his brigade commander is killed, Iverson assumes command of the brigade, and a promotion follows on November 1st, 1862 to Brigadier General. And it is Brigade Commander Iverson that will come here to Gettysburg. Unfortunately, and this has a lot to do with the fact that he was a Georgian, and he was now commanding a brigade of entirely North Carolinian troops. There was a lot of friction that had developed between himself and the men of his brigade. And by the time they got here to Gettysburg, there was a lot of tension between Iverson and the men of that North Carolina brigade. And unfortunately, what happens here at Gettysburg is going to do nothing to alleviate that tension. It's only going to exacerbate it, as we will see in a few moments. When the fighting resumes in the afternoon of July 1st, General Rhodes, and he really can't take all the blame for this because his corps commander is there with him, but Rhodes is going to make the same mistakes in the early afternoon that General Heath made that morning, meaning he's going to send in his division in piecemeal, only 2 brigades at first, and it's going to be done without proper reconnoitering of the ground. And by Iverson's own admission, O'Neill's brigade, Colonel O'Neill's brigade, is going to launch the attack first, with Iverson coming in shortly after him, and General Daniels is going to come in behind him. And Daniels will actually throw one of his regiments to Iverson to protect Iverson's extreme right. Now, when Iverson launches his attack, and they are going to be heading towards Oak Ridge off there in the distance, Iverson is going to deploy his 4 regiments, and the front is going to be about 400 yards long. We know this much about Iverson's brigade. When they stepped off and began their march towards Oak Ridge, they really didn't know what they were going to get themselves into, but they were aligned in order of battle this way. On the extreme left, and basically hugging the Mummersburg Road, was the 5th North Carolina. Next to them was the 20th North Carolina, the regiment that Iverson helped raise. Next to them was the 23rd North Carolina, and on the extreme right of Iverson's line was the 12th North Carolina. That is how they would march towards Oak Ridge. Again, about 400 yards wide, and they would be met by extremely murderous fire when they got very close to Oak Ridge. Following the death of General Reynolds, General Abner Doubleday not only became commander of the First Corps, but he also assumed temporary overall Union command. And he was aware that Confederates were going to be coming down from the north, so this area of Oak Ridge he reinforced. And the 1st Brigade that was here was that of Henry Baxter. Now, at the start of Iverson's brigade beginning its march across that field out there, believe it or not, he only had 2 full regiments and 8 companies of another regiment facing that direction. The rest of the brigade was facing north to deal with that threat. When Baxter's division commander, General John Robinson, arrived here on the field and saw that 400-yard wide line marching towards this direction, he ordered the entire brigade to face that way. Originally, it was just the 12th Mass, the 97th New York, and 8 companies from the 11th Pennsylvania facing that way. But now the entire brigade would face Iverson's attack, while at the same time Robinson ordered General Paul's brigade to this area to meet the rest of Rhodes's division, as well as the 11th Corps had started to arrive on the field, and they were down this ridge, and they were also ready to meet Rhodes's division. But again, we're dealing just with Iverson in this episode. That 400-yard wide line is coming this way. They have no idea what is awaiting them. The entire brigade, Baxter's brigade, is going to be behind stone walls, and they are going to wait until Iverson's men get to within about 100 yards of the spot I'm standing at, and they will rise up and they will let out a murderous volley on Iverson's men. When Iverson's men got within 100 yards of that stone wall, the Yankees rose up and let out a murderous fire. And from what all accounts say, with that first volley, about 500 of Iverson's men fell, dead or wounded. Reading now from Noah Andre Trudeau's book, Gettysburg, A Testing of Courage. A survivor from the 23rd North Carolina later recalled that, quote, when we were in point-blank range, the dense line of the enemy rose from its protected lair and poured into us a withering fire, end quote. Another member of the 23rd, who was marching in the second rank at that instance, would later tell his brother that he had been, quote, sprayed by the brains of the first rank, end quote. That is how deadly the fire was for Iverson's brigade as they marched across here. They fell as if they were just dropping to the ground during a parade. There was nothing for them to do. Those who tried to get up and run were shot down. Those who remained here and tried to shoot back as best they could from lying on the ground were shot at. Those who did not reload laying down but stood up to reload were shot down. And here's the worst part of all. Those who tried to surrender, who were waving white handkerchiefs in an effort to try to avoid being killed, they'd rather be taken prisoner, were shot at by the Union Army. And that is deplorable. That is something that the Union Army, those soldiers up there, should have been ashamed of. Where was General Iverson during all of this? Well, General Iverson didn't march forward with his brigade. He stayed behind. And he would be accused of being a drunk, that he was drunk at the time. There was even some talk of cowardice. He did not march forward with his brigade. He did not share the dangers that his men in his brigade faced. And he would suffer criticism, severe criticism, really for the rest of his life over that. And let's take a look at what happened to General Iverson after this battle. We know this much for sure, that Iverson's brigade suffered terribly here at Gettysburg. Iverson did not march forward with his brigade. There was no proper reconnaissance done beforehand. They basically walked into a death trap, and their effective fighting ability was diminished. Actually, it ended here on July 1st. They really were not used for the rest of the battle. And by all accounts, Iverson would suffer a nervous breakdown as a result of this. His troops that already didn't particularly care for him very much, pretty much despised him at the end of this battle. And General Lee had also had enough of Iverson. He was relieved of command and sent back to his native Georgia. The two main sources I used for this episode was Harry Fans's book, Gettysburg, the First Day, and Trudeau's book, Gettysburg, A Testing of Courage. And at the back of that book, Trudeau had this to say about Iverson after the war. Robert Rhodes, unlucky brigade commander, left Lee's army under a cloud and returned to his native Georgia, where he redeemed himself in a brilliant action against raiding Union cavalry in 1864. After the war, he tended orange groves in Florida until his death in 1911. It also didn't help Iverson's case that in his own after-action report, when he mentioned about the soldiers waving the white handkerchiefs, anything to save their lives, willing to be taken prisoners, Iverson described that as deplorable, although he would retract that statement in the same after-action report because he didn't understand what he was seeing at the time. Again, he was way off in a distance and not with his own men. But members of the 23rd North Carolina had this to say, and I'm now quoting from Fanz's book, Gettysburg, The First Day. After the war, Captain Vines E. Turner and Sergeant Henry C. Wall of the 23rd Regiment wrote an epitaph for the brigade at Gettysburg. It said, quote, "Unwarned, unled as a brigade, went forward. Iverson deserted band to its doom. Deep and long must the desolate homes and orphaned children of North Carolina rue the rashness of that hour." Unfortunately, Iverson's reputation and his military career were forever tarnished by his actions, or shall we say inactions, here at the Battle of Gettysburg. And too many North Carolinians paid the price. And if you like what you saw today, please hit the subscribe button. Give a thumbs up. Also, notify your friends. Let them know about this channel and ask them to subscribe as well. If you like, you may leave a question or a comment below, and perhaps I will answer your question in a future episode of Civil War Reports. Until next time, please keep the history alive.